Hello, my name is Chris Lehman. Today we're going to be taking a look at Spitfire Audio's new Contemporary Drama Toolkit and how easy it is to take the textures and sounds and quickly create something which sounds modern, suspenseful, and professional. Spitfire's new Contemporary Drama Toolkit, or CDT, as described on their website, is a broadcast-ready sound set, expertly curated and produced by award-winning composer Samuel Sim and Spitfire's team of composers, to help score to picture without the theory, without compromising on emotion. Across 72 individual instrument patches and 44 combinations, expression is baked into each sound, leaving you to focus on your music instead of software menus. Much like the massively successful British Drama Toolkit, CDT's sound palette is thoroughly curated, originating in a masterful blending of its source material, mellow chorus tones of a Juno 6, iconic MS-20 textures, vocalizations, and inspiring lead lines performed on guitar, electric cello, and electric violin, all processed via an enviable collection of analog effects, vintage pedals, and a Eurorack module. Everything from whispered textures and bold melodies blossom from the simplest variants in playing, unlocking a world of sound in every patch. So that's their sales pitch. Is it as good as they say? Well, let's take a look at something I made in roughly an hour's worth of work and see if it lives up to the hype. As inspired by Christian Henson in the contextual promotion video for the CDT, I hopped on YouTube and found a recent trailer. In this case, I used the trailer for Marvel's new comic adaptation of Alien. Let's take a listen of what I composed and then we will break it down, along with some final thoughts on the library. Okay, so here we are in the project. Let's take a listen to the final product and then we'll talk about what exactly is going on. Okay, so that's it. I think that sounds pretty cool, and given the amount of time I spent making this, I think that that's a pretty darn impressive result, and that given a few more hours, that, the time that you would normally spend on a full-length track, you could make something really special with this, not knowing a ton of music theory, and not having to use a ton of different tracks, because each sound is so comprehensive, and I'm really satisfied with this purchase. And if you're looking for something to give you a little bit more of that hybrid sound when it comes to writing for drama or writing trailer music, I would definitely recommend this. One thing to note is that a lot of the sounds sound similar in a way, and you can tell after listening a few times whether or not something comes from the CDT. It has a unique sound to it. So there's going to be a lot of music in the coming months and years using this. So finding ways in the future, as a note to myself, to stand out would be to make sure that I'm not using just sounds from the CDT. But in this case, I wanted to just test it out and see how much I could get out of it just using the Contemporary Drama Toolkit. So anyways, let's talk about what's going on in this piece. So first, I'm going to mute everything and just play the silent video and talk about what was going through my mind as I wrote the music here. So it starts off with this weird comic look that we're not quite used to seeing when it comes to Marvel, and I know when I first watched this, I thought it was for a show, so that threw me off, not realizing it was for a comic book. But yeah, it's a cool, unique trailer that you don't see from Marvel all the time. We're used to seeing a ton of action and whatever, funny dialogue or stuff like that. But this is definitely super dark. And myself, not having watched any Alien films or read any comics in the past, I'm writing this just based off what I'm seeing, and I like how dark it is, and I think that it's something that it's going to work really well with the CDT. So yeah, going throughout this, I've sort of not talked about the trailer. It starts, this could be anything here at the beginning, where this could be setting us up for something sort of cool and sci-fi and fun in a way. But then you get these sort of weird alien things that are sort of scary, and then this really dark, relatively speaking, Marvel intro into something that gets really dark here, with the scary text, the shaky screen, and then we fade to black. So in this first section, I'm sort of viewing all as one. I want it to be a dark, evolving sound all throughout, and then I want to fade into something sort of soft but scary during this sort of coming to black and introducing the alien character. And there's this flashing moment right here that I really wanted to emphasize. That was something I noted. And then we get into the heart of things, and we're introduced to many different characters. It looks like humans fighting off these, maybe multiple aliens or just this one alien. I can't quite tell. It might just be one. We see this character who looks like maybe he is past or was a hero or something. There's sort of a glowing light on him in a way that makes him look like a good character, so I wanted to emphasize that. And then things get dark here. We get this scary looking thing, and then we get the end here, where we're introduced to the comic. And so that's it. It's a pretty short period of time, except for this final sort of post-credit type scene from Marvel, where we see clearly like a good character there, or at least in my opinion. I don't see how this couldn't be a good character, just based off of like the super darkness of everything else, and then we get into this very light, bright coloring here. It just gives off good character, except for this guy. I don't know who he is, but he looks spooky and scary. So I wanted it to sort of switch from being dark throughout to something sort of cheerful here at the end. And then we get a close up on this guy, and we're like, wait a second, this isn't actually something that's cheerful. This is scary. This is, a horror thriller comic. And this guy, it's all this guy's fault. I don't know if it is or not, but that's how I wanted to write it. So yeah, that's what's going on without any music in the background. We're going to turn all the music back on, and we're going to talk through how I got to where I was. So I started off with just the Combi textural default CDT patches. I'm not really going to spend any time talking about how CDT works. There's an awesome walkthrough from Paul Thompson, which I will link through, or put a link to in the description, and I would definitely recommend watching that and then coming back to this if you're not familiar with how the CDT works. But essentially, it's a bunch of really long, evolving, unique, distorted sounds, which are going to be great for drama, trailers, etc. In this case, I chose Highlands here. In what would normally be the different articulations down here, we're actually choosing between different sounds. So we've got fireflies, frozen textures, and then, another one, random. So you get the vibe of what we're dealing with pretty quickly here. Let me just hold one down. Let's just do frozen textures because it's a good example of generally what the library sounds like. Just hold down one C minor chord here and see what it sounds like. yeah, so you get the idea of what we're working with. Anyways, the sound I chose was Highlands for this intro piece, and I used a low D note. And that is literally a low velocity D1 here is all that's going on in the first 8 bars. And another thing to note, I set up the tempo in such a way, I chose 119, so that this first, after the Marvel intro, the classic Marvel intro here, right when we get into the first text here, was right on bar 9. So that's the reason for this tempo. And then it slows down during this middle section that I talked about earlier, so that, again, we can, right when it gets into this final epic section, we can get a hit right on bar, why are you zooming in somewhere else? We can get a hit right on bar 20 here, and just to make things easy for myself. So yeah, it slows down to 79 here, and then back up to 120 for the final section. And then it speeds up slightly at the end, just to help some, I don't know, I'm sure, I think, I sped that up at the end so that I could get a chord change right when it zooms in on this spooky dude's face right there. I wanted to get a natural chord change going. So yeah, that's the reasoning behind that. So anyways, Highlands, I literally didn't automate anything. I just left it for this intro piece with just one D note. And that's it. And I liked the idea of letting that sound continue to evolve during the Marvel intro, because, as I said, when you see these opening shots, you don't necessarily know how dark it is, what we're getting into. And as a way of setting that up for someone who's viewing this trailer, instead of switching to something more traditionally orchestral, like a lot of the time they would during this Marvel intro, or a pop song or something, letting it continue to evolve into this dark sound was a great way of letting the listener know, in my opinion, that this is gonna be dark, that we're in for a rough time here. And so yeah, I think that as the picture dramatically changes into an opening credit scene that we associate with something so heroic and adventurous in that Marvel intro, letting it stay really dark, like, for instance, what they did at the beginning of Endgame when they didn't bring in really happy brass or adventurous brass or whatever. They just let it stay this ominous sound. Was right after, if you remember, right after we see Hawkeye's children and wife get snapped to dust, leaving that ominous ambient sort of evolving patch continue to play as they did. If you go back and watch Endgame, that it's a way of letting you, okay, like, we're in a dark time, and so that's why I chose to just let that be. That was the musical choice behind what was going on there. And then in the second section, we've got it continuing the same exact patch, evolving again, but at this time the velocity is way up, so the whole thing is just going to be times 10. Honestly, if you really wanted, you could kind of just leave it at that, as this, shakes and gets scary through this next section. But of course, I wanted to add a few other things to test out the library and to see if I could find a way to add some extra tension. So when I was writing this, I knew I wanted to add some impact, so that was the next thing I did. I added a whoosh off of Splice and a hit from Action Strikes, and we get this sound right after the intro. So that's it. That's the only hit there in this intro section, except for this one boom, which is another sound off of Splice, I believe, that I have hitting right on the "you scream" text. I messed around with throwing booms or hits or impacts or any sort of trailer type sound on all the different text, all the different introductions to text, but I thought it was too much. It got too hectic, and it brought away from the scariness and ambience that I was going for. So there's this boom sound that I only use once in the trailer, and then you hear it right on, you scream. Loud and distorted sound. So the next thing that's going on here is I went into the CDT and went to their, you can see when you open it, you get different options here. The Combi textural is going to be the default. I went into some bass sounds and found a pulsing sound, so that without me having to, hit notes over and over and over again, I could just hold it down and it's going to pulse for me, which was great, and a great way of building tension. So what's going on here to get the sound that I wanted is, first off, I'm just playing an octave here, just a D1 and a D2. Or maybe it's, no, excuse me. It's a D0 and a D1 all the way down here. So that's the sound we're starting with. Let me just turn these off for a second, the effects. So that's the sound we're essentially starting with here. The next thing so as these evolve, let me leave all those off. And I'm using the mod wheel here, turning up the mod wheel as a way of opening up the sound. So on its own, it's naturally building pretty nicely. But in order to enhance that, I threw on some distortion. This is a hard clip, so really sort of gross, grimy sounding distortion. And that is automating. So over the course of the sound, the mix, the dry wet is turning up, and it's going all the way from none all the way up to fully distorted. And that's going to increase the volume too much. So in order to deal with that, interesting, I also automated, I didn't even remember doing this. So I guess I separately automated both the drive and the mix. So it starts off really, really sort of quiet, relatively speaking, and then gets really loud at the end here with the drive on the overdrive all the way up and the mix all the way up. But that, of course, got too loud, too loud even for what we were going for. It was just overwhelming the mix. So I just went to gain and brought down the volume. So now with the distortion and the gain, and then the one other thing is I'm using this Pancake plugin, which is a panning plugin. So it's going to be bringing your signal from left to right for you. Let me add one more here so we can show what we're doing here. So we're bringing the dry wet from 0 again on the Pancake. Oh, it was already there. Oopsie daisies. Here it is. Pancake from 0 to 1. So that it starts in mono in the center, and is getting to a point where it's, fully pretty much in the left or right ear. It adds a cool rising effect, and with all the distorted sounds going on, it really didn't muddy the mix or anything to bring the bass sounds out of mono. So now with all those effects, this is what we're dealing with. And then, of course, we're muting it right as it ends, just to add to the sense of tension, so that right when everything fades to black, all the music goes away, and we get this scary build-up into nothing. So as of now, we've got a bass, we've got a Highland sort of pad patch. I wanted to add a cello, so I went into their electric cello patches down here. I chose this one. The short electric cello distant, I'm assuming that's distant lead, I believe, and it's gonna naturally fade for us. So this is gonna be what the sounds what it sounds like. Or let me turn off my effects. Then I throw in some delay from waves. Make it even more distant in a way, a little more ambient. And then we've got some bit crusher, which I believe is only being automated in. Yeah, it's being automated at the very end to build up even more tension there. So that sound, as the mod wheel, as you can see, is sort of split up into two different sections here, where the first time it comes in, it's just playing the root note. We're playing a D, playing this D, and then we're going up to the fifth. And then all that was left, or here, let me just mute this. It needed a little bit more tension at the end. So I threw in a violin. I wanted something high and screechy. Again, we're automating in some overdrive. We're using our gain over here to turn this violin into really just a swell. You can see here the volume goes up quickly and then down quickly. And then we're using the D minor chord with the six on top of it here in this B flat, and we get. Let's see, I need multiple hands for this. Nope, too far up. Is it this one? No, it's this one. Pretty gross noise there. So yeah, this is gonna sound like this on its own. And that was exactly what we needed at the end there. It really fills out the sound. So then we've got our intro done, and we're gonna hop over to this middle section. So this is where I help use the just high notes. We're going to use first off the Frozen Textures patch. We're just going to have a high D. Or no, that's a low D. Where am I? Okay, so we're starting with a high D. We're going to the second. And then we're getting a really loud, thunderous low D right when it starts to flash. So, and this is being, with our mod wheel, this is being just filtered in. So as the alien is brought into the picture, so is our sound. So our frozen textures sound like this. And this is a great patch for using different velocities. When I'm that gets really loud, but it can also just be so soft at the top. So you can sort of use that as an impact if you want, and that's basically what I did here. Was instead of using any other impacts, it's just the sound of the frozen textures there, and that's layered with a vocals patch from CDT, and this is just fading in a D note there. So the two of them combined are going to sound like this. Nope, or they're not going to. You can't hear this one too well, but it is adding something there. Yeah, so that's what that's adding. And then we get like a reverse cymbal. We get our whoosh again. Our action strikes hits. This Bram, trailer sound and a dirty impact to really to let the listener know, like, all right, we're into the heart of this now. This is where things are getting real. So yeah, that's what those are going to sound like. And then as far as what's going on here, we're mainly using this snapped strings patch, which is going to be this one from the CDT. We're going to be starting with some softer notes, because I wanted those impacts to really be to be felt really hard. I initially had it where I was, playing this. I'm playing again just a D with a open fifth and a low D. I initially had them coming in really hard, like that, but then you couldn't really hear the impacts as well. So I wanted to have those be soft. In Logic, the sort of bluer your sound, the softer the velocity, and the redder, the harder. So like this note is a much softer velocity than this one, say. So yeah, you can see that this is getting harder. So anyways, as far as what's going on throughout this section with this snapped strings pass, we're starting with our Ds here, our octaved, I don't know if that's a word, Ds there, along with the open fifth. And then we are moving up to what would be, what are you? A minor seventh? Yeah. Anyways, I'm losing myself here. But yeah, so we've got our fifth, and then up to the seventh here, and a C note, and then down to the six, and then we change chords to we introduce the six here in our B flat, and then we go to a B flat chord, sort of, where we're using that as a root note, and our D. So it's sort of like it's a B flat chord without. I'm working through my music theory here too. It's a B flat chord, B flat major, but without the fifth. So it's we've got this B flat down here, no, down there, and our D. And that's more of an uplifting sound, and that, again, is I've got this hitting right when we see this guy, who I determined was our good guy, our good guy of this epic section. So it's sort of heroic there, and then we're going to be moving down the scale to get to stuff that sounds more, we're going to our 4, then to our 5, and then back down to our 1. But we're using notes that are closer together here to build up some tension as we get back into the darkness. We get happy here for a second on this sort of, it's not really a major chord. I don't really know. But those two sounds that are going to sound a little bit happier together, and then we get dark as we move down this. And that's the progression that I'm going with there. And then these hit right as we get to our alien. This is the comic that's coming, our alien. So yeah, these snap strings are going to sound like this along with the picture. And so yeah, that was pretty cool on its own. I took advantage of these vocals and really automated again. Surprise, surprise, some distortion here. Using a bit crusher and the pancake trick again to widen up the sound to layer it on top of the strings, and that's going to sound like this. And then I'll add in the cello too. A way of letting the listener know we've made it to this end here is to, in a weird way, it's soothing's not the right word, but it's sort of like bringing in this pulse bass again just adds a level of like finality to it that it's like, okay, we made it. You'll hear what I mean when I play it. So yeah, that's all that's going on for those sounds. And yeah, I don't know why the word soothing came into my brain. It's the farthest thing from soothing there at the end. But it was a way of finishing things off that sounded finished and correct musically, to bring back in this synth bass, but also kept up the darkness. I guess that's kind of what I was trying to say. And then, I used a hit again at the midway point once we see our hero here, and then a hit from Action Strikes Again right when we get the end credit, sort of, if you will. And then last but not least, I'm using these plucked strings, which is another different patch here just to try and test out the different aspects of the library. We're sort of automating in this G major chord, this inverted G major chord. That's too low. Sorry, my microphone's right in front of my piano. It makes it a little more difficult to play. Here, let's get to the point where the gain's a little higher. It's sort of really quiet. Anyways, so that's going to be in, if we're working in D, our G note is going to be our 4. So I wanted to automate in this. Oh, that's what's going on. It's the mod wheel. So I'm using the mod wheel to automate in this 4 chord, just because the G major is bringing in a level of happiness to it, or a level of, it's just a really calming chord. I don't know. It worked well, but then we're transferring up from our G major chord our inverted G major chord to our D minor here. No, excuse me. Oh, we're going from G major to, what am I doing? We're going from our G major chord here to our D major. And so that's right when here on the video is when we transition to, we're on our root note with our D, and we're playing a D major, which we haven't heard yet. And so that's going to bring about a level of happiness. Like I said earlier, when we saw our guy here at the end, it's like, this is a good guy. Maybe there's some hope. And then I'm switching to this, I believe it's called a sus2, chord where I'm using the D, the second note in the scale, which is the E, and our fifth, which is our A. So we switch from this major sound to, once that guy comes in, it's like, oh wait, hold up, this isn't actually happy. It's a subtle difference with those sounds. If I just brought in like a piano real quick. What am I doing? Not that anyone particularly cares about this. I don't know why I'm going through all this effort. And my knowledge of music theory isn't good enough. I shouldn't be giving out lessons on music theory. But anyways. Oh, come on. There we go. So we got our D major chord. Anyways, essentially we're going from an inverted G major chord to a D major, and then we're going to this sus2, so it's, and you know, if I were to play that a little bit lower, maybe it switches from happy to dramatic quickly. So that's the idea of what I was going for there musically. And then of course when it goes to really black, we go down to the low D for a sense of resolution. And that's that. That was the trailer I made using the CDT and, you know, an hour or two's worth of work. There's a little bit of mixing going on the master channel where we're using Ozone 9 for some stereo imaging to widen up the sound, just using a virtual mix rack here with a small amount of EQing. We're using this, you know, another slate compressor, which I don't even remember what this one's called. But anyways, this is just barely doing anything. It's just catching some of the peaks and then a limiter to make her nice and loud because it is trailer music after all. And so that's that. You can see how easy it is to use these sounds. You can see hopefully how inspiring these sounds can be. And yeah, I would definitely recommend the CDT for anyone who's looking to add on to their libraries and get something that is going to be super easy to use. So if you enjoyed, if you learned anything, please hit that subscribe button. If you're still here by any weird chance, please, you know, give the video a like, and I look forward to seeing you with some future tutorials, walkthroughs in the future. Yeah, thanks for sticking around, and I hope you enjoyed. Also, if you do have any questions, because I'm clearly stumbling over my words a lot, and the structure of this tutorial may not have been the best, please do leave them in the comments. I'd be happy to answer. Yeah, so thank you so much, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.